Are you tired of the 9-to-5 lifestyle? Do you want more freedom to do what you want, when you want it, without sacrificing your current income? Then this is the show for you. Every week, we dive into John's journey towards financial freedom and everything he has learned since 2014. Real estate investing, cryptocurrency, stocks, private lending, foreign residency, tax saving strategies, infinite banking, assets protection, and much more. Now, here is your host, the founder of the Wealth and Freedom Nexus, John Rickgarn.
Good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on when you're listening to this. This is John Rickgarn, your host of the Wealth and Freedom Nexus podcast. For those returning listeners, hope you've enjoyed the journey so far. And if this is your first time listening in, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. Now, during this journey with my various guests that I have brought on, maybe you've connected already with Wagner from episode 2, where they specialize in the build to rent industry for single family up to duplexes. Maybe you touch base with Lip and Danny Lynn of episode 4 of Freedom Real Estate Group, or maybe Marco in episode 16 with Narada Real Estate, all providing turnkey investment properties for either your first investment property or maybe your second, third, or fourth. Maybe you've gotten pre-qualified or gotten your financials started to get together with Kaylee of Ridge Lending, who we had on for episodes 20 and 22. Now maybe you're on your investment journey and you're getting close to closing, and now we need a place to close. We need to get all the documents signed. We need to make sure they're recorded with the proper recorder's office, make sure that the chain of title goes from the seller to the purchase or the buyer, and make sure that all goes smoothly without any hiccups. So with that, typically what you will want is to work with a title and abstract company. Now, maybe this is the first time you've heard this and you're wondering what the hell is a title and abstract company. So with that, I brought on a good friend that I've known for many years, Mark Ruud of Title and Abstract Services right here in Marshall, Minnesota, to give us a little background of the ins and outs of what title and abstract companies do, why you need them, and why they're beneficial for your pre-closings and your investment properties. So Mark, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, John.
So maybe you can first just a little bit of your background, how you got into the industry, and then, how long you have owned Title and Abstract Services, the company.
Sure. I've been in real estate since 2001. So it's a little over 20 years now. I started out as a mortgage loan officer up in the Twin Cities and then in Kansas City and then to the big town of Marshall here in Southwest Minnesota. And then I mainly did mortgage home loans, and then at one point ventured over into commercial lending a little bit.
Okay.
I worked for a company called Wells Fargo Home Mortgage, small little mortgage lender. Some people may have heard of them.
I think I've heard them maybe once or twice. So
yeah, and then I left and went to a small bank called Home Federal Bank. Now it's known as Great Western Bank. Didn't anticipate going into the title company business, but at one point the owners of Title and Abstract Services approached me saying that they were looking to retire and thought I would be a good fit to buy the business, primarily Norwegian descent. So it took me a little over a year to make up my mind and do something. I don't move always quickly on those things, but it's been great. So I took over March of 2018. So I guess about 4 years now.
All right, cool. Very good. So, we've obviously gone over a little bit of your background, but for maybe someone, maybe a first-time home buyer, or, maybe you're starting to shop around and buy their first investment property, and maybe the entire process is new to them from, the inspection, the appraisal, the financing, everything. But as they're getting closer to the end goal line, what exactly is a title and abstract company, and why should someone work with a company like that versus, say, just like the local attorney's office?
Sure. What people typically see of us is probably just the closing process. So that's the part where they're coming to the closing table, and I've got a stack of paper about that big of legal documents that we're going to go through. We're going to explain them and have them sign them, and then basically kind of be an intermediary for the buyer and seller of the transferring of funds and the recording of the documents, i.e. maybe the mortgage or the deed that need to be recorded.
Okay.
But that's kind of, it's like the Titanic. That's just the little iceberg you see. What we do, most of it is below the surface. So really kind of what we do in one shot on it, primarily on like a real estate transaction, is that once we get the purchase agreement, it depends if the property is abstract or torrents. We go into that later, but we're going to do a chain of title. So we're going to go back, statute in Minnesota is usually 40 years. So we're going to go back 40 years to a good deed. So not a quit claim deed, but like a warranty deed or something like that.
Okay.
And we're going to make sure that every time the property has been conveyed, that we have a clear chain of title. We don't have maybe, John and Mary bought the property and then John sold it. Well, what happened to Mary and her interest in the property? Or if, John sells the property and it doesn't list his marital status, we may want to know if he was married or not. In Minnesota, it's 1 to buy, 2 to sell.
Gotcha.
We also want to make sure that if, Jim took out a mortgage, that mortgage got satisfied or paid off.
Okay.
So that the new buyer doesn't have a lien against the property. We call them encumbrances in the business, but we want to make sure we address any easements, liens, leases, judgments, basically anything that could be detrimental or cause financial concerns to the buyer, where maybe they have to pay something off that was from a previous owner.
Okay. So maybe kind of in a nutshell, more of ease of mind or peace of mind, I should say. And, no surprises that, 20 years ago, there was a long forgotten, mechanics lien for someone that added on the porch, or some family feud I've seen a few times where one person says, oh no, dad promised me proceeds of this and I never got it, or brother Jim got it all versus Sally, Tim and Jim, or obviously you got, family strife sometimes thrown in there as well.
Absolutely. And it even can just be an error that someone, whether it was a title company attorney, drew up a document incorrectly, that we can get that addressed, prior to closing, so that the mortgage company is in first lien position, and that the new property owner doesn't have any of those things against their property. To kind of answer your question as far as why a title company over an attorney, it can be a preference. I'd say one thing is, for a title company, this is all we do. Okay. So, I'm in Southwest Minnesota. We have lots of small towns, and we have a lot of great attorneys around here, but they also may have to draw up trust agreements. They may do 15 different things, where this is all we do is real estate transactions. That's all we do. So,
okay. And then maybe just like you had mentioned before with Minnesota law, 1 to buy, 2 to sell, maybe one attorney where 90% of what they do is, say, estate planning and trust, maybe they're not aware of the 1 to buy, 2 to sell. So they don't, check all the boxes to make sure that the one person did buy and 2 persons sold, or it was just one person of the spouse or the other sold the property, but the other one wasn't listed. And well, wait a second, what happened to them? So,
yeah. And for us, I think our basically business models maybe a little bit more streamlined, because that's what we do. It goes to Bryn, who's our abstract or our searcher. She's going to do the property reports, and I'm going to do the examination on that. And we're, and I don't, maybe an attorney's in court for 2 days, where I really hope I'm not in court, because I'm not an attorney. So if I'm in court, it's something maybe bad, but
right. So makes sense. So now you had touched base on this a little bit, and maybe some of my listeners aren't familiar with this with title process, but in the recording world, so to speak, there are abstracts and then there are torrents. What's the difference between the two, and is one concern over the other, shall we say?
Yeah, the main difference, most property is abstract property. Okay. Now in Southwest Minnesota, we still have these things called abstracts. Yep. All this is it's a document that's going to show any liens or any encumbrances on the property, any transfer of title since the patent, which this one was Renville County, but say we're in Lyon County right now. That's going to be late 1800s. I think Lyon County became a county in 1872. Okay. So, but anytime that the property is anything that's been recorded at the county is going to be in the abstract.
Okay.
If you go to larger cities like the Twin Cities or a lot of states now, they don't update abstracts anymore. It seems to be more of an agricultural thing. And so we have a lot of great farmland around here, and the farmers like the abstract. We like them too, because like I had said before, I have to do a 40-year chain of title or 40-year review. Our county records in a lot of these smaller counties like Lyon County, Redwood County, Lincoln, Yellow Medicine, Southwest Minnesota, their online does not go back 40 years.
Okay.
So then I actually have to go into the county recorder's office or one of our Bryn here would do that.
Okay.
And then we go into their old books, and these books are just massive, and you're flipping through them. Most of them around here go kind of to the mid to early 90s. So with that 40-year chain, we're only maybe 10 years away from not having to, hopefully it will all be online.
Gotcha.
But so abstract, a reviewer needs to go back 40 years, do that chain of title search.
Okay.
Torrents is a little different. Torrents property, it's was named after a guy last name Torrens. I think it was Richard something or Robert Richard Torrens.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
And he was it was an Australian thing that started. And you get a certificate of title. So you don't have to go back 40 years. On that certificate of title, it shows, like, if you bought a house today, John, and it was Torrens property, they're going to give you a certificate of title.
Okay.
And then if you end up taking a mortgage out 3 years from now, they add what they call memorials, or could be mispronouncing that word too, but I think it's a memorials. And so anything, if I go to do an examination of it, I know who the owner is and anything that's out there.
Okay.
And it's what you see is what you get. But I don't know that in 1932, the owners of the property got a divorce, because I don't need to know that.
Okay.
And then Torrens property, really, it's a lot easier to search. If there's like a bankruptcy or foreclosure, it goes through, at least in our area, through a Torrens officer, which is typically an attorney. So, Lyon County, the Torrens officer is Paul Ruud. So if there is something in there, he has to review that. There could be heirs in title on either one.
Okay.
Your lender is going to require title insurance on either property.
Okay.
Typically, I guess, in my experience, there's probably a little less. Torrens is a little bit more stable.
Okay.
Because it's just there's a little bit more checks and balances done through that. But there can still, something can be missed always. But I'd say Torrens is a little easier. We just don't see as much of it.
Okay.
Redwood County has quite a bit of Torrens property in Southwest Minnesota. Lyon a little less, and there's always talk that they would convert everything in the state of Minnesota to Torrens property, but the cost to do so is pretty substantial. And the question always is asked, well, who's going to pay for that?
Sure. And then you got a lot of finger pointing, like, well, I shouldn't have to pay for it. It should be the seller or the buyer, or the lender, or the courthouse, or then some.
Yep.
So okay. Now with the abstract and title, and you touch base on this a little bit. Obviously, if you are purchasing a property and then you're getting a first lien mortgage on that, whether it's Wells Fargo, Ridge Lending, or somewhere in between, many of those lenders will require you to have title insurance on it. Whereas I know some places, if it's just like a cash transaction, some places or some buyers, I should say, are just fine with what's called the title opinion. Could you kind of go over the two differences?
Sure.
Pros and cons of the title opinion versus the title insurance?
Yeah. So whether we issue title insurance or not, we always do a title opinion. I'm still always going to, on a transaction, do my 40 years chain of title.
Okay.
I'm going to, make sure there's no encumbrances out there, that we don't at least address them, that there's no liens out there that haven't been satisfied.
Okay.
And so on a title opinion, we would issue that and just show then who's the owner, anything that's out there, any easements that are out there. The title insurance is just insuring that information.
Okay.
If you bought a house cash, you don't need, the lender's not there to require you get title insurance.
Sure.
But the lender's, if you bought a house with a lender, you're going to have homeowners insurance as well.
Sure.
If you bought a house cash, you don't need homeowners insurance, but you're probably going to buy homeowners insurance, because just in case something were to happen, the house were to get hail damage, it's cheaper than fixing it yourself.
Exactly.
Title insurance isn't a whole lot different than that, other than it doesn't insure what's going to happen from today going forward, it ensures what happened in the past.
Okay.
I say if you bought a $100,000 house and you may have a couple $100 for the title insurance,
Mm-hmm.
if you never need it, it seems maybe expensive, but it's a one-time fee, and it's a fee that you just pay when you buy. You don't have to pay it for it again.
Okay.
But if there was an issue with title insurance and it finds out that Sally years ago still owns some of the property, you could dispute that and go through the court system. And typically an attorney is going to cost you more than a couple $100.
Exactly. Easily.
And we had a great example a few years ago. A person had bought a commercial property. The seller, and thankfully this wasn't under my watch either, I was really glad about that, but the seller had a pending tax lien.
Okay.
Federal tax lien that showed up right around the time that the deed was recorded.
Oh, wow.
So the new owner was going to sell it, and they, through a realtor, called me up and were like, what do I do? There's a $28,000 federal tax lien on this.
Oh, geez.
And I can't sell the property without this getting paid. And I said, well, did you buy an owner's policy of title insurance? It's like, yeah. Like, okay. And it happened to be through the company we work through, which is Stewart Title. Well, they took care of that in the back end. He was able to sell the property.
Okay.
I'm sure that they went after that previous seller and did their due diligence that he made sure he paid his tax lien. But that person then wasn't hung up where they were thinking they couldn't sell the property unless they paid this $20-some thousand that they didn't owe. So that $170 policy that person bought paid for itself.
Yeah, easily. I think that's well worth the expense there. So,
yeah.
But in regards to that, and hypothetically in that situation, say there wasn't title insurance, and it was just a title opinion, whether from you or attorney, where hey, I looked through everything and I didn't see this. At that point, it would still just fall on the current owner. Well, this is on you now. Unfortunately, is that correct? Or
correct? I mean,
okay.
Let's say someone closed with me, and that happened or something, and then there was an issue. The first thing we're going to go back and make sure is did we miss this issue, or was this something that wasn't recorded?
Okay.
And if it's something that we can fix, well, we do anything we could to help them out with that. But if it's something where it wasn't anything that our error, it was just something that wasn't recorded, or maybe it was tracked to the wrong piece of property or what have you, that title insurance would have protected them. If they have a title opinion, now it's still on them. So,
okay.
Well, the benefit of title insurance is if there's an issue, it's a lot cheaper than paying for that issue through, an attorney and courts and waiting for that and maybe delaying your closing.
Sure.
The disadvantage would be that there is a cost incurred, but it's usually pretty minimal. It's typically going to be less than 1 year's homeowner's insurance, and it's also based on the property price. Someone buys a $40,000 property and they're like, I don't know if I really want to pay for that. Their title insurance might be like $120. So
sure.
It's,
Well, at that point, I mean, if you're spending $40,000, what's another $120? At least that's how I look at it. But
if you got $40,000 cash, hopefully you got $40,120. So
yeah, exactly. So okay. Now, as far as obviously you and I are both based in Minnesota. I have listeners throughout the United States as well as overseas. So I don't expect you to know the title process, Bulgaria or Peru, for instance. But within the continental United States, is the title and abstract services and the recording process, is it all pretty similar, or can it vary from state to state?
They can. The title insurance can be fairly similar, but
okay.
But with every state, it's the United States, so it's every state has their own laws.
Okay.
And then in every state, or at least let's say in Minnesota, we have counties. Every county is a little bit different on what they require from a recording. Very, thin layers of gray on that. It's not huge differences, but so from state to state, yes, I mentioned, I think earlier we said 1 to buy, 2 to sell in Minnesota.
Mm-hmm.
So if I buy a house and then later on I get married,
yeah,
my wife, even if she's not on title, has to sign off on that, or she still has some ownership rights to the property.
Okay.
So every state's very different. I am only licensed in Minnesota. So beyond Minnesota, I don't, I don't operate. And so I think that's where finding a local title company or an attorney, is probably best. And then a lot of times you can find, there are some national companies like Stewart Title is who we use for issuing of title insurance.
Okay.
They're in multiple states. Their headquarters is in Texas. So
Okay.
they're in multiple states. So oftentimes you can, still find one of those. And maybe if you found one and you like they're specific the way they work, you can find another Stewart title agent in another state as well.
Okay. Sounds good. As we're getting close to the end here and kind of wrapping up, and maybe if we want to put on our, future looking glasses, if you will, obviously we've had a, explosion in blockchain technology and cryptography, that is, obviously disrupting the finance space, real estate space, everything. Long term, what do you see, or how do you see that impacting, where I know some people have talked about where title insurance won't be necessary in the future, where everything is recorded on a blockchain that can't be altered once it is in there, and moving forward that, you can just look up, it's like, all right, here's a 40-year history, bang, bang, boom. I don't need an abstract. I don't need a title insurance. I don't even need a closing company. What are your thoughts on that? Or do you see that as pie in the sky, or not too far down the line to really worry about?
When looking to buy a title company here, I was concerned about that. I thought, okay, I'm in my 40s, is this going to be something where at 52, I'm looking for a different career? And I hope no government workers are a part of this listening podcast here, but everything's recorded through the government. And because every county is different, it's so segmented, I don't see that changing quickly.
Okay.
I think the more changes we'll see in our process will be more e-signings.
Okay.
This Zoom thing, doing maybe closings via Zoom. We even have started to see that now in a lot of the mortgage documents, where I used to get that stack I said about this, and now sometimes we're getting that smaller stack because someone e-signed the non-essential. I shouldn't say non-essential, but they e-signed the documents that don't have anything to do with recording. Lenders still require usually the note or the promissory note, and then the mortgages to be signed with wet ink. But
sure.
So I think this is going to be an industry that's a slow moving process.
Okay.
And then the other thing is, just because you signed it and it got recorded doesn't mean it was right. A lot of recorders around here are really good. If something isn't correct, they would reject it. But they could just record it. Now we've got a problem and you have to fix it later someday. But in the next 15, 20 years, I probably, we don't even have our documents viewable online for 40 years yet. In a lot of areas. So getting to a point where that's all converted probably would take quite some time. And then again, on that, someone's going to have to actually go through the process and update all those things. So how do they go about doing that, and who's paying for that? And most of the time, like the county recorder's offices, they don't get the best and biggest budget of all the government agencies. They're scanning stuff in and just making sure that they've got a correct chain of title, just like what we're doing. So,
yeah. And then kind of back to earlier, what you said, where previously in Minnesota, they had talked about switching everything over to abstracts or everything over to torrents and just having one throughout the state. Well, obviously that'd be a, huge ship to turn and get everything lined up. And again, who would pay for it?
Right. Yeah. And then I say that, and we'll get done with this podcast, and there'll be a news article in 2 days saying it's all getting switched. So
yeah, exactly. Some new federal program. Here's $1 trillion. Go wild and crazy.
Yeah. We've got administration right now not afraid to spend money. So you
exactly, or print money as much as we want.
Yep.
Great. Well, as a final closing note, Mark, is there anything maybe I've left out, or anything else you feel my listeners, if they are looking to purchase an investment property, that they should know about title insurance, title and abstract services, or something that I might have missed?
Just with any title company, the main thing is what you see just at the closing table. There's a lot more that goes on to that. And really our job is to make sure that your investment is sound and that it's yours, and it's not, there isn't an error or something or a gap in ownership. And that also that you're not stuck paying the bill for someone else's stuff that was never taken care of.
Right. So, yeah. And I think the one example you gave earlier, I think spending $140 $142 to not have to pay a $24,000 federal tax lien would be very, very well worth it.
That's a great investment there. Yes, absolutely.
So sounds good. All right. Well, I want to thank you again, Mark, for coming on the show. I hope my listeners have gotten some good info on this, and make sure you hit that subscribe button and stay tuned, as we'll be going into other facets from not only the abstract world, but also the appraisal, the financing, and all the legal aspects of property ownership as well. So until then, make sure you subscribe, and talk to you soon. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you for listening. Be sure to share, rate, review, and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. For more updates, check out www.wealthandfreedomnexus.com. Remember, nothing on this show should be considered tax, legal, investment, or professional advice. This show is produced solely for educational and informational purposes. Please consult an appropriate and licensed tax, legal, real estate, or business professional for specific advice for your situation. For distribution or publication rights or media interviews, please contact the host.